Hello and welcome to another episode of The Closing Track, the official podcast of Another Ascending Lark, where music and the Christian worldview collides with false memories. Because I remember that time when I was at the Alamo, and I didn't make it out alive because everybody died.
And I remember the time that I warned Samson not to mess around with Delilah, and he didn't listen to me, and then we all know what happened to him.
I remember that time I was standing by David, like as he was about to go out and fight Goliath. And I mean, I tried to tell him, like, look, dude, like, he's really, really big, but thankfully he didn't listen to me.
Yeah, thankfully. And I'm kind of brain farting on another fact.
I remember the time. Do you remember the time? You were talking about this the other day. Do you remember the time when you were when in the Emperor's throne room when Luke and Darth Vader were battling it out?
Yeah, I do remember that. That was kind of intense. And I was like, bro, Vader, that's your son, dude. You gotta stand up for your son. And then
you gotta be a family man, yo.
And then instead of saying yes for some odd reason, he just randomly yelled no as he threw the Emperor down into the core.
I remember that time that I was at the Grammys. Like, I was front row seat at the Grammys. No, actually, I don't remember that time because none of these things happened. The opening for this week's episode comes courtesy of Brian Williams and his amazing ability to, like, just kind of lie about something that you just can't make up. Like, how do you make that up?
I don't know. I mean, that is kind of a weird thing to just make up.
It's like, well, no, I mean, it's a great thing to make up because it's, I mean, what better, like, street cred to be a journalist than, like, man, I was in this war zone and I was in this helicopter. He doesn't actually talk like this. Yeah. And I got under, RPG and small arms fire and the helicopter got forced down.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand saying something like that, like in pre-internet days, like if you tried saying that in the Vietnam War, but with the way the internet is, he had to know that eventually this was going to come to bite him in the butt.
And with the way that the internet has been just ruthlessly, like, destroying him. Like,
yeah, my uncle posted a picture that showed Brian Williams in a photo with Abraham Lincoln, to which I said, didn't Abraham Lincoln say to be careful about pictures you find on the internet, though? To which he said, no, that was probably Al Gore since he invented the internet.
Boom. Boom. My name is Austin. I'm the head honcho of Another Ascending Lark. I am the guy who actually has really, really bad memory on a lot of things. And by the grace of God, I'm not Brian Williams.
And my name is Brett. I'm the editor over at Another Ascending Lark. And I have a very spastic memory. I'll remember random facts that will have absolutely no usefulness whatsoever, but then forget drastically important things.
Yeah, that's true of me too, but I'm just like, oh, why am I thinking about this really random tangent? That has nothing to do with anything, so I'll just ignore it. This show is like this show is like the playground for all of our random tangents.
We might as well just change it from the closing track to the rabbit trail.
No, to the shuffle.
Yes.
the shuffle track where no two sentences logically follow each other. That would actually be really hard.
Yeah, it is pretty hard to sleep at night.
We got another great show for you planned today. We got a couple of reviews. One of them is going to be Brett's taking on probably the most controversial review that we might have ever done. With Marilyn Manson.
Yeah, possibly.
I can't think of any other album that's quite as controversial as this one. It's funny because you're gonna review Marilyn Manson after I review Jeremy Camp. I mean,
That's definitely the biggest juxtaposition we've ever done.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest leap that we've ever done. We go from like mainstay CCM radio artist to Marilyn Manson,
who for some reason now looks like Nicolas Cage.
No, Nicolas Cage. Yeah, we got some great stuff planned out for you. By the time you're listening to this episode, it'll be tomorrow and the Grammys will be over. And I'm looking forward to watching the Grammys and live tweeting the Grammys tonight. But if when you're listening to this, you want to hear our thoughts about the night, you can go over to AAL blog and just scroll through and read all the things that we tweeted throughout the night. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're having friends over and making pizza and having some good homebrewed beer and yeah, it's gonna be a good time. We're looking forward looking forward to the Grammys tonight. But by the time you're listening to this, the Grammys will have already passed because, time travel.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, stuff. I'm glad we don't do this, live show, because that would just be so much more stressful.
Yes, it would.
But if you want to contact us, our Twitter handle is AAL Blog, or Facebook page. You can find us by just searching for Another Ascending Lark on Facebook. You can send us emails at anotheraascendinglark@gmail.com. And of course, you can visit the new anotheraascendinglark.com, where we post all the articles and things that we reference in each show. We had a couple of articles published this week, and got a couple other reviews coming down the pipe. And so, so if you want to let us know about all the things you've misremembered, all of the crazy, crazy things that you've misremembered, you know what to do. And depending on how bad it is, we just might mention it on the air.
Yes, if it's that bad and it makes us laugh, then I will have to steal it and use it.
And we'll give you like credit for it. Like we'll totally give you credit for it.
You'll get internets for it. That's how we will pay you in internets.
You'll just get little bits of internets for it. Not much in the way of news this week. We got a couple of things. We got one interesting thing from New York. Brett, what's going on in New York?
Back in 2010, Patti Smith said that New York City has closed itself off to the young and the struggling, and says, but there are other cities, Detroit, which, why would Detroit be one of those you mentioned?
I read that, and I was like, Detroit?
Yeah, I'm like, no, I'm not moving to Detroit. Actually, random tangent, I once saw a few pictures of sort of rubble and destruction, and it said, screenshots from new Fallout 4. Nope, just Detroit.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so
that's terrible.
Detroit, Poughkeepsie, New York City has been taken away from you, so my advice is find a new city. Well, current New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is trying to change that, and during a State of the City address on Tuesday, he announced that he plans to provide 1,500 units of affordable housing reserved exclusively for low-income creatives.
Because that totally can't go bad.
Not at all.
No, because that totally is a genius idea on paper, and nothing could possibly go wrong with that.
And he says that the plan is to develop 150 units a year over the next 10 years, alongside a separate 500 total units of workspace, which that part I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that part is really legit.
It says, it still hasn't been decided exactly where these are going to be, but 2 pieces of land at least will be chosen by December for the first part of the project, which I'm like, that's kind of a long ways away to start this plan, but whatever.
That's New York. I mean, when you plan something out for New York, you have to take a century to get anything done.
Yeah, and de Blasio says that we know New York City is the city it is today, in part because of the contributions from the generations of artistic visionaries who at one point struggled to make ends meet. And he said that, and no, he didn't say it, but current income limits for the low-income people who can stay in these classify as between $29,400 and $47,000 a year, with families of 4 qualifying between $41,951 and $67,120. So I make too low of an income to be in this.
No, you probably make you would probably make just enough income for them to even consider you, I would say.
Yeah, and although if you look at, New York City definitely has a lot of contributions from the arts. You have Broadway. I've been in Brooklyn a lot over the past 2 New Year's Eve time periods, and the Brooklyn School of Music is so pretty massive. Beast. You can see it from miles away.
Yeah, it's a beast. It's huge.
Yeah, and you can definitely see a change. It seems to me that more creatives are wanting to come to New York City. Primarily, one thing you see is Bed-Stuy here, that used to have a reputation for being one of the roughest neighborhoods in the world, where a lot of famous hardcore rappers came from, and now it still does have that sort of a reputation, but also hipsters.
but hipsters. Hipsters are the I don't know what hipsters are.
I don't know either.
I don't know what hipsters are.
But I remember last year when we were in Bed-Stuy, we wanted to go to this coffee shop that's there, and we were walking around back and forth on the street. We couldn't figure it out. Then we saw a hipster with this massive infinity scarf, and we're like, hey, let's just follow that guy, and it worked. But unfortunately, the coffee shop was closed.
Sad day.
Yeah.
I haven't had New York coffee. I don't know if New York coffee is any good or not. I bet it is. I bet it's really good. But
it's nothing compared to New York pizza.
Oh gosh, no. Are you kidding? man, I've only been to New York once, and it was a miserable experience, and I never want to go back again. But
Okay, no, you can't say crap because after Hurricane Sandy, I was on the coast sleeping in a beach house that had had its heating knocked out by the hurricane. It was also one of the coldest winters they've ever had.
well,
That was a horrible experience.
yeah, that's a horrible experience. But I mean, you deliberately went there. I found myself with me and a bunch of white high school like Texan kids, like wandering around Harlem at 2:30 in the morning.
Okay, Harlem is nothing compared to where we were.
No, it's not. But I mean, still, it's slightly terrifying. And just
Fair enough.
and just because, like, I don't know. I would love to go to New York again at some point, perhaps. But
Definitely to sample the various foreign foods. Goat curry is delicious.
that does sound really, really good.
To those of you who haven't eaten goat, it is like the tenderest meat in the world.
Yeah, I have heard that goat is definitely an amazing meat. But
Yeah.
we have plenty of goats around here. Why don't we just go grab one and kill it?
We really should. Hey, I know when we do that give a goat donation thing at WT, we should say, hey, can we just buy a goat from you for our own personal use?
That's a great idea.
Yes.
That's a fantastic idea. That's really good stuff. My phone is like exploding with notifications at the moment. So Taylor Swift, because I have this really like demented fascination with Taylor Swift's antics and how here's the thing. Taylor Swift is like the Illuminati. I mean, she's slowly and visibly taking control of everything and is showing no signs. Brett's making this triangle because triangle is the symbol of the Illuminati, and yeah, she's beating Disney now. She's trademarking phrases of the English language. Taylor Swift is the Illuminati. I'm totally kidding, of course. I don't believe the Illuminati, but no. So Taylor Swift was met with protest over her trademarking this sick beat by a metal song because that's just metal. That's just definitely metal to protest pop artists by making a metal song about
Yeah,
them.
metal is definitely, at least in my opinion, the antithesis of pop. So I think it's very, very poetic, sort of, that it was a metal song that protested this.
The guy who did it operates under the moniker Peculate, and the title of the song is called "This Sick Beat" with the trademark thing attached to it, and it's literally "this sick beat" over and over and over and over again, and just set to this really crazy 2-minute prog metal creation that has more. It's got more shifts in it than Taylor Swift. I don't know. That didn't make any sense, but yeah. So the guy's name is Peculate, and the name of the song is "This Sick Beat." If you don't like Taylor Swift, or if you like metal, or if you just want to hear something really stupid and crazy, just go look that up. And that's it for the news because there just wasn't really anything interesting this week. But now it's time for the greatest economy of reviews that we have ever undertaken.
Yep.
So Jeremy Camp, I will follow. Let me just say right off the bat, this is worlds better than his last album, but it's still bad. But it's still really, really, really bad. When you compare it to his prior album, which did I ever play you any of the samples from his prior album?
I don't think so.
I don't think I did. I mean, did you hear anything from his 2013 stuff?
I'm sure I have, but if I have, I probably blocked it from my memory.
Because it was so painful to listen
Yes.
to.
Just like I blocked the album that must not be named from my memory.
Now we're assigning Voldemort status to that album.
It deserves Voldemort status.
But yeah, Taylor Swift's... strike that. Reverse it. Jeremy Camp's I Will Follow. I've had too much Taylor Swift on my mind. Yeah, he definitely has quite a leap forward with this album, even though it's still very much generic and bland. But it is nowhere near as dull and lifeless as his 2013 album Reckless was. The album starts out with the most, stereotypical primed for Christian radio release, possible. It's called Living Word, and lyrics are biblically solid, but they're not all that great. I mean, that's Jeremy Camp. Jeremy Camp is not necessarily one to have like the most elegant or he's pretty just straightforward and blunt with his songwriting, but he doesn't have necessarily anything profound or new to say in his songwriting, and that's true of the entire album. But then it gets into the second track is the title track "I Will Follow," and dare I say it, it was actually a decent rock song. Which I mean, dare I say it, it was actually. I mean, it's not great by any standards, but it's decent. It's definitely decent. And then it moves into another a semi-decent track, "He Knows," which I think is the first single of the album. And then he goes into this super stereotypical, and like, I mean, stereotypical as all get out, mandolin ukulele driven folk-y track, "Finally Home," which I don't know if he's trying to get into, having his music in for commercials, but I mean, that's clear. Like, you listen to the song and you're like, oh yeah, I could hear this as like the background music for like 20 billion different commercials, because it's got this fun little, ukulele vibe, and he's got, these heys and hoes, and I mean,
so basically he's gone hipster.
No, he hasn't gone hipster, but I mean, he's trying to like capture that hipster essence, I guess, and maybe like Christianize it, because there's not any hipsters in the church. There's not any hipsters in the Christian church.
Yeah, I mean, there's like no hipsters at all in our church.
I mean, if you're a hipster, it's probably a sign that you have never heard of Jesus before.
Yes, indeed.
To all of our hipster friends, we're totally kidding. We're totally kidding. Till the End is a pretty stereotypical, or Christ in Me and Till the End back to back are pretty stereotypical. Can't Be Moved. Can't Be Moved has the most generically bland possible kick stomp intro in all of creation. Like, I was listening, like, when I first heard it, I'm just like, this is it? Like, I mean, it's literally it's literally the most basic possible combination of kick stomp for a rootsy rock song that creation could possibly, like, in all of creation could possibly exist. Which I gotta give him credit for. Like, that's actually pretty amazing that you could get down to something so generic and basic. And then Only in You is a fun folkier song. Same Power is gonna be probably the worship offering for the year. And then We Are the Dreamers and Here I Am, they're fine. I mean, they're not bad per se, but they're also not standout worthy in any way. So the biggest thing I think is that you can tell when like someone is singing, and like you can tell like they don't want to sing these songs. That was probably the biggest plague of his last album, because it was like his vocal delivery was so lifeless, and you could tell just like he just wasn't into it. He's definitely into it this time, which does a lot for the album. And the album has really good flow. Album's actually got pretty good consistent flow. It doesn't feel like two tracks just kind of bleed into each other. I mean, there's enough diversity on the album musically to prevent that from happening. And I mean, it's not game changing by any means. Every single song on this album will be on radio at some point, because that's all Jeremy Camp is probably interested in now at this point, is being on the radio. And that's fine if he wants to do it, but the stuff that he's doing is not necessarily, amazing in any way, shape, or form. But this is definitely a step up from his last album, and it's got some small highlights to it. It's not something I'm going to recommend or anything, but it's also, I mean, I give him props for not sinking any lower than he did with his last album, because his last album was one of the worst albums that I heard in 2013. That was one of the worst releases of the year, and even the general like Christian critic community looked at that album and just kind of raised their eyebrows, and they're just like, "What is this?" Like,
yeah, if even the CCM hardcore fanboys are like, "What the heck?" then like, it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like Jesus Freak Hideout, when Jesus Freak Hideout published their review of it back in 2013. The comments were just like, "Yeah, this album's really bad," and I'm like, I'm a lifelong Jeremy Camp fan, but this album just sucks. And then you have, the guys, of course, like, guys, we shouldn't be criticizing Jeremy Camp for what he's doing because he loves Jesus and these songs are about Jesus, so we shouldn't be criticizing anything that he does.
Facepalm.
So I'm gonna pin this at a 5, and that's slightly generous on my part, but I was genuinely impressed this time around. It's certainly not any caliber of his earlier work. His earlier work is still the best stuff he's ever done, but I mean, this was okay. I mean, it's okay. And that's all I have to say. Now, let's shift gears and let's go to the most controversial album we probably will ever cover. Brett, go for it.
It was good.
Well, that was short.
But, Marilyn Manson's The Pale Emperor is probably the most different album he has ever released. He's actually even dropped the whole shock value based thing.
Wait, so he's no longer like this. It's not like Hollywood, where, I mean, it was about as blatantly blasphemous as it could possibly get.
No. I mean, like, there was, of course, language and sexualization in it, and even a reference to a fictional demon character, which I'll get into later on in this review. But, I mean, it wasn't like a straight up blasphemous album like I was expecting.
Well, color be impressed.
And not only that, but this doesn't sound like Marilyn Manson at all. Like, I was probably the main reason why I didn't like Cupid Carries a Gun the first time I heard it when it was released as a promotional single is because it wasn't what I was expecting. But listening to the whole thing through and reading some stuff up about it, this is a much bluesier album than anything he's ever released. It even has some rockabilly in it.
Dang it, now I have to listen to it, because all I have to do is throw out the word blues, and I'm automatically just, interested. Dang it.
However, the album starts off with Killing Strangers, which has some of the most repetitive lyrics I've ever heard. So basically, they got guns, we got guns, we got guns, we got guns. We're killing strangers so we don't kill the ones we love.
That sounds like a rap song.
It does. And it reminded me a lot of The Purge when I listened to it.
Yeah? Yeah, that actually fits really well. Maybe it was about The Purge.
So, I mean, overall, I mean, it was decent. I mean, it had a nice bluesy beat to it. You could rock your head to it, but I mean, the lyrics kind of killed it for me. The third song, Third Day of a 7-Day Binge.
Yeah, our friend Thomas was telling us about that song.
Yeah, that was, I mean, lyrically, it was definitely better than Killing Strangers. It's not, I mean, this whole album wasn't like lyrical genius or anything, but I mean, it was.
Mind is probably so fried by all the drugs to write solid lyrics anymore.
I mean, it was decent enough, and probably my favorite track on the album, number 4, The Mephistopheles of Los Angeles.
Now I have Trans-Siberian Orchestra playing in my head.
First off, Austin, do you know who Mephistopheles is?
Yeah. But okay. For our audience.
Yes, for our audience. Mephistopheles is a stock demon character now, but he first showed up in the story of Dr. Faustus. When Dr. Faustus wanted to sell his soul to the devil, Mephistopheles showed up to perform that transaction. And Mephistopheles was even like, are you sure you want to do this? You're selling your soul. This is a pretty big thing for a temporary thing. I mean, yes, your life will be better, but do you realize what your eternity is going to be? And this is a demon working for Satan saying this.
Because this is totally consistent with the Christian worldview.
Yes, and one thing that a lot of critics have said about Mephistopheles, which I kind of agree with, and sort of points to total depravity, is that he does not go out and seek to corrupt humans. Instead, he just takes the souls of those who already are corrupt.
Yeah, I mean, Satan doesn't have to, like, necessarily work hard to destroy us. I mean, all he has to do is just wind us up, and we start destroying ourselves.
Which that's a main reason why I discount the whole Robert Johnson selling his soul thing, because Satan's smart enough to not do a transaction like that to buy something that he already owns.
Yeah, I mean, he's the prince of the power of the air. I mean, as far as scripture goes, I mean, he's been the ruler of the world. I mean, he doesn't need to. That stories like that, I mean, yeah, they're, rock and roll folklore and things like that, but I mean, as far as the Christian worldview goes, I mean, Satan just seeks to devour and destroy, and he doesn't need our permission to want to destroy us.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm pretty sure they mentioned this on the pub when talking about Robert Johnson, where they're like, Yeah, he's like the worst businessman ever if he buys people's souls.
Right. Right. Definitely. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to Marilyn Manson.
Anyways, and I mean, the rest of it, I mean, yeah, it was decent. The only other track really worth mentioning that much is Cupid Carries a Gun, track 9. And like I said, at first I listened to it. I didn't really like it at all just because I was like, what the heck is this? This isn't Marilyn Manson. But listening through it again, it's got a really nice beat to it. I mean, you can definitely hear the blues in it, but then there's, of course, Marilyn Manson's individual flavor to it. And lyrically, it is better than a lot of the other tracks on here. Like, pretty much everything between Mephistopheles of Los Angeles and Cupid Carries a Gun is repetitive and, I mean, just kind of bland-ish. But I think I might be willing to be a little bit merciful because this is a new territory he's going into. And basically, I'd say that where he's good, he's really good. But where he's bad, it just comes off as lazy.
So, I mean, it sounds like he doesn't necessarily have the songwriting vocabulary yet for the sound that he's going for.
Definitely, which, I mean, I think Killing Strangers is the best example to prove that. But I will give him credit too. He's not going towards the shock value that he used to. He's legitimately trying to make good, solid songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a strange love-hate relationship with Marilyn Manson. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, the guy is definitely not a believer, and I would love to see Marilyn Manson come to Christ, and turn away from his lifestyle and legacy of sin and evil. But he's an amazing musician. I mean, I can't deny with a straight face that Marilyn Manson is an amazing, like, talented musician.
Like, if y'all haven't heard the cover he did of This Is Halloween from Nightmare Before Christmas, that is a great rendition.
I mean, I listened to it was a couple years ago, but I was talking with an atheist friend on Facebook. He's not on Facebook anymore. I've lost contact with him since, but he's like, all right, so you should really listen to Marilyn Manson's Hollywood. And I was like, what the heck? Why not? Why not listen to it? And there was some good stuff on there. As far as the songwriting and the composition and the recording goes, as far as the lyrical content and the worldview, I mean, it's plagued with death, and it's plagued with an unregenerated frame of mind. Now, I don't believe Marilyn Manson is beyond the redemption of Christ, but I mean, he's such a talented musician, and so I appreciate that fact about him. But it's just definitely sad to see someone who is so good be so lost. And like,
Definitely.
Yeah, be so lost, and hopefully, Marilyn Manson confesses Christ and turns away from his sin and places his faith in Christ. That'd be amazing. That would truly be wonderful. But what would you pin the Pale Emperor at?
I'd probably put it at a 7.
Okay.
I mean,
You've been generous this year, like more so than last year. Like,
well, I mean, if you listen to it, I mean, you'd understand, like, it's kind of like the last album I did. I mean, it's repetitive, but it's not bad.
yeah,
And there are some legitimately good songs in this. And he's changing up his style. I gotta give him respect for that. He's dropping the whole, or at least for this album, he's dropping the whole shock value based lyrics and attempting to go deeper. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
gotta give him credit for that.
Next week, we have a massive list of stuff that's coming out next week. We have Brandon Heath's No Turning Back.
And a bunch of other stuff.
That's really all we know. Our AAL critic Josh is going to be taking his stab at Brandon Heath's album, and so you can look for a review for that hopefully a couple days after the album comes out. But no, there's a bunch of stuff coming out this Tuesday, but we don't really necessarily are familiar with anything. And so what I'll probably do is I'll probably just pick a random album that shows up on Rhapsody Tuesday morning and just review it for the heck of it.
I'll probably do the same.
Just to listen to something that I haven't listened to before. So next week we'll probably cover some stuff that we haven't covered before. But no, I'm just waiting until the end of the month when Red's new album comes out. I'm really, really excited for that. that's one of my first like seriously excited releases for the year. But let's get into our main course for today. So we're continuing to move through Francis Schaeffer's Art in the Bible, and today in particular we're looking at pages 19 through 31. So if you have a book, you can read the sections that we're coming from. If you don't have Art in the Bible, you really should get a copy of it because it's a great book. It's really really amazing. And for a book that's called Art in the Bible, I mean, it would be remiss if we didn't actually look at art inside the Bible.
Yeah.
Like, that just kind of defeats the point to talk about art in the Bible if we don't actually talk about art inside the Bible. I mean, that just makes sense. Yeah, we're gonna look at some stuff in the Old Testament in particular. We're actually gonna camp out quite a bit in the Old Testament today, and then we're gonna talk about the second commandment in particular, the tabernacle and the temple in the Old Testament, and then how the Bible testifies like to the down to earthness of the things that are made in Scripture. Like I think that's one thing that we forget is that the Bible is a very down to earth collection of writings. It's not all upper level like super high and lofty spiritual stuff. I mean, that's the whole point of the incarnation was Christ coming to us.
Especially, I mean, that can be seen even in the language Jesus spoke. Jesus spoke Aramaic, the trade language.
He didn't speak like some heavenly language that
Yeah.
no person could understand.
He came here speaking a language that everyone can understand, and so people from all nations who would come and hear him knew what he was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a down to earthness of the Bible that I think we either emphasize it too much, like at the expense of the spirituality. That's not necessarily the best word, but it's the only word I can think of the Bible, or we like don't acknowledge the earthliness of the Bible. We have to hold both of those things in tandem. That the Bible is a holy book, but it's also a book that is not so lofty that it doesn't have anything to say towards our daily lives. Especially true in the Old Testament because,
Ehud.
Yeah, Ehud.
And Elijah.
Yeah, and Isaiah and Ezekiel. Man, Ezekiel is probably the most relevant, like, for our lives, biblical character in the Old Testament.
Ezekiel, with the stuff he wrote, he was either a legitimate prophet of God, or he was on shrooms or something.
Yeah, like, did they have shrooms
Or
back
aliens.
in the day?
I'm pretty sure they did, but maybe not in that part of the world.
I mean, what kind of drugs did they have back in the day? He was just drunk. If Ezekiel was not a legitimate prophet of God, he was drunk.
Or
Like,
aliens.
Or aliens, because there's no way that any sane person would have written down the things that Ezekiel wrote down unless it came from God. Like, that's definitely true. But yeah, so let's get into the second commandment, because Schaeffer notes in the book that many Christians have pointed to the second commandment as a reason why Christians can't like make art. Brett, will you quote us Exodus 20:4-6 and give us what the second commandment of the Ten Commandments has to say?
You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments.
Okay, so you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness or anything that is, heaven above, earth beneath, waters below, basically. And you can't bow down to them and serve them, basically. Now Schaeffer asks, like, okay, if we are not allowed to make images of God, but we're also not allowed to make like images of any likeness of, heaven above, earth beneath, waters below, then what can we do? Like, what can we do?
I mean, it's pretty clear, though, if you read this, it says, you shall not make an image, and you shall not bow to them or serve them. So, I mean, as long as you don't worship your photography or your movies or that kind of stuff, then you're fine. I mean, probably one of the most blatant examples of the violation of the second commandment was the golden calf.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
They didn't make the golden calf as something that wasn't Yahweh. They made the golden calf and said, this is Yahweh. Worship Yahweh through this golden calf.
Yeah, that it was a visible representation of a spiritual fact and of a spiritual reality that God did not command. The golden calf is probably one of the most fascinating stories in the Old Testament just because it's so true of our daily lives. I mean, granted, I haven't, taken a bunch of earrings and gold jewelry, melted it, and, crafted a golden calf any time recently. But I mean, have I certainly have made idols and worshiped them? Oh, yeah.
And then in another sense, I mean, this is more spiritual than physical, but if you look at today's American society that mostly claims to be Christian, it's not Christianity, it's moral therapeutic deism. They have created their own false image of the Christian God and worship that.
I think it was Martin Luther who said that the human heart is a factory of idols. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's certainly very true in my life. I mean, idolatry is definitely something that I don't think we talk about enough in the modern church, because it's something that we're so engulfed in it, we don't know how to deal with it. Which, yeah, idolatry is pretty terrible. Yeah, but you're right. Like, the text makes it pretty clear that the prohibition is tied to worship, and that only God is to be worshipped, and only by the means that, like, he said, "You shall worship me in this way." And then Schaeffer points to another passage in the Torah that kind of clarifies the second commandment further. He says in Leviticus 26:1 that you shall not make idols for yourselves, or erect an image or pillar, and you shall not set up a figured stone in your land to bow down to it, for I am the Lord your God. Now, to our modern ears, like, this just seems like a duh.
Yeah.
But I mean, when's the last time? Actually, I can't answer that question. But Brett, when's the last time that you've actually have seen stuff like this?
Last year in New York City when I went to the Temple of Ganesh.
Okay, so I was thinking maybe you saw something like that in New York. Yeah, when I worked for Terminex, I did quite a bit of hotels and motels here in Amarillo, and believe me, there is a difference between the huh and the There's a major difference between the hotels and the motels.
Hotels don't have microwaves on the toilet.
Yeah, I mean, trust me. There's a world of difference between the two. And they're all owned, or I would say 99% of them, are owned by a Hindu family. And I would see every time I go there, because at least as far as the motels go, the motel owners would live on their properties. Like, they live on the properties that they own. And I would spray their part of the property, and I would spray their house every month. I'd go out there to spray the other rooms or whatever, and they would have shrines everywhere. I mean, I saw more shrines than I could possibly count. I saw elephants. I saw a lot of elephants, and just a lot of other just crafted idols. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, I've been to New York City twice around New Year's time, and first time I went to a smaller Hindu temple. I mean, it seemed more like a shrine to me. I mean, it was basically just one room where there were a bunch of different idols beautifully dressed. And then last year I went to an actual full-size temple. I think it was the first Hindu temple built in New York City. It was mainly to Ganesh, who basically is the god who deals with problems and that sort of stuff. He's a very popular god to be the main one in a newly constructed temple.
Mm-hmm.
And then a while back when I went to Tokyo, I mean, I saw Shinto shrines, I saw a few Buddhist temples, and it was still the biggest temple I've ever been to, the Asakusa Temple for Mahayana Buddhism.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I cannot express to you how dark it felt in there. Like, when you first go in, there are a bunch of different corridors depending on which entry you go through. That's just an open air marketplace,
right,
where you just buy stuff, and everything you buy there goes directly towards the temple. And just stepping foot and seeing the massive gates with these demon looking elemental gods, I'm just like,
yeah, definitely.
Probably the most depressing thing I saw was there was this woman praying at a golden Buddha, rubbing the Buddha after putting money in it, then rubbing various parts of her, and found out that's the Buddha of healing, that in order to heal your ailments, you give money, and then, you rub this in certain places and it will heal you. And I'm just like,
yeah,
that was really depressing to see.
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
Probably the darkest place I've ever been to.
Yeah, the motels that I did, there were a couple in particular that I mean you could just feel you could just feel something in, I don't want to say in the air just because that's not, that doesn't quite convey what I felt, but I mean, you could just sense something was off. But that's like, this is something that like drastically separates other religions from Christianity, because other religions are so visual driven, and Christianity is not. I was listening to a podcast with Michael Horton, and Michael Horton is one of my favorite theologians. I'm like, oh my gosh, I love Michael Horton. If you don't listen to the White Horse Inn, oh my gosh, start listening to the White Horse Inn. It'll change your life. And he had a guy on, like a Hindu missionary on, like on the ground Hindu missionary, and then a Muslim guy on, and the Hindu guy was talking, and he's like, one of the things that separates Hinduism from Christianity is that Christianity is a religion of where hearing takes precedence. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. But don't be just hearers of the word, but do the word. Whereas Hinduism, like, and Buddhism and all these other things, are so visual driven, and it's one thing that separates Christianity from all these other things, is that we're not visually driven. So, oh, sorry, go for it.
Saying one thing that definitely separates a Hinduism from Christianity is, I mean, it's very universalistic. Like,
oh yeah,
the Hindu priests I talk to, I mean, they're like, what do you want to know about Hinduism, blah blah. And if I'd mention, well, I'm a Christian, they're like, oh, good, excellent, you're a Christian, because they believe that I was on one of the paths to heaven. I mean, if I converted to Hinduism, they'd probably welcome me with open arms and be very happy about it. I mean, it's the same, like in the first Hindu temple I went to, there was also the Sikh holy book, which, just a little background information, the Sikh holy book isn't like the Bible. I mean, most people don't have a copy of it in their home. It's very beautifully enshrined, and there's a cover over it, and it's only read in, sort of public arenas, and as it's read, it's being dusted with a large feather, because not a single fleck of dust is supposed to touch this book.
Right.
And Sikhs are sort of the same way. I mean, they have their own strict way of beliefs. I can't remember all of them, but there are 5 things that a Sikh has to have on them at all times. One of them is the comb in their hair that's never cut, and one of them is a dagger they keep on them at all times. I don't remember the other 3, but they're a religion that doesn't actively seek out converts, and they're very much believe what you want to believe.
Right.
And I've never really sat down and talked with a Sikh before, but I'm pretty sure that they would say the same thing the Hindus did, that, oh, you're a Christian, good, excellent, you're on the path to heaven.
Yeah, and that's definitely the biggest thing that separates Christianity from other religions, is that no, there is only one God, and there is only one name given under heaven that must be saved. But yeah, like, I mean, that's a little bit, we went a little bit on a rabbit trail there, but I think it brings up a really good point. One of the things that separated the Protestant Reformation from the Catholic Church was that the Catholic Church, at least in the time of the Reformation, was very visually driven, and the Catholic Church had a real bad problem with making images to be used at least in the church, if not necessarily for worship,
especially with indulgences.
Oh yeah. I mean, images were quite a thing, and so one of the things that the Protestant Reformation and the Reformers did, in contrast to the Catholic Church, was putting a prohibition on making images of Christ, which is how the Second Commandment is. The Second Commandment, at least as far as Reform circles go, outside of the Reform circles, like the idea of the Second Commandment also including a prohibition on making images of Christ, like, doesn't cross minds. I mean, before I would say that I was Reformed, like, I'd never heard of it. Like,
yeah, same here.
Yeah, I definitely never heard of it.
Like, when I first entered the pub and I read the rules of conduct, one of the rules that shocked me was that we can't post any pictures that show Jesus, because a lot of the members believe that it violated the Second Commandment. I was like, what?
Yeah, from question 109 of the Westminster Larger Catechism. The sins forbidden in the Second Commandment are all devising, counseling, commanding, using, and any wise approving any religious worship not instituted by God himself, and then the making of any representation of God, of all or any of the 3 persons, either inwardly in our mind or outwardly, as any kind of image or likeness of any creature. And then you wanna read from yours because I put the London
Yes.
Baptist one in there too.
From the London Baptist Confession of Faith, which I adhere to, whoop, whoop, mostly. Chapter 22 says, "But the acceptable way of worshiping the true God is instituted by himself and so limited by his own revealed will, that he may not be worshipped according to the imaginations and devices of men, nor the suggestions of Satan, under any visual representations or any other way not prescribed in the Holy Scriptures."
So we bring this up because Schaeffer doesn't mention this. Like Schaeffer totally doesn't touch on this subject in art in the Bible. He doesn't offer any commentary on the historic Protestant stance on forbidding images to be made of any members of the Trinity, even incarnate Christ. Schaeffer doesn't touch on that, which I find kind of fascinating. And in a sense, I kind of consider a weakness of the book because we live in a time where images of Jesus are all over the place.
They're incredibly inaccurate, but they're all over the place.
Yeah, and they're very trite too. Like,
Yeah.
probably the majority of them are really, really trite.
And then there are those that look like Kenny Loggins.
There's the Mormon Jesus. The super handsome, like, American Mormon Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, just getting back to those two, the Catechism into the Baptist Confession of Faith. I mean, I disagree with both. I mean, the Baptist Confession of Faith clearly says that you can't make images of Jesus in any way, shape, or form. But the Westminster Catechism says we also can't have any images in our mind.
Right.
So that would mean that everyone that saw Jesus when he was incarnate is sinning just because they saw him.
No, confessional Westminster people would say no, that's not what the Westminster divines had in mind in that particular statement. We're not gonna. We'll have to revisit this at some point. We'll have to bring on an actual Westminster confession. Confessing Westminster Christian.
Too bad we don't know anyone like that.
I know, right? We may not live with someone who might be able to help shed some light on this. I lean in the direction of Westminster. I don't think that some Reformed Christians take it to the extent that making images of Jesus is blasphemous, and I think that's ridiculous. But I definitely understand the reasoning of the Westminster, and I lean more in that direction than not.
I can definitely understand in a culture that recently came out of the Catholic Church and seeing the blatant idol worship that goes on there and still goes on in there today, I can see why they'd want to push away from that for sure.
Yeah, there are some instances where it's hard because a good example is Sovereign Grace's "All I Have Is Christ." It's a beautiful hymn, and there's a video on YouTube, and I'll probably link it in the show notes on AAL, where it's a very beautiful hand-drawn video, and there's a scene in the video that corresponds to the song where "You looked upon my helpless state and led me to the cross, and I beheld God's love displayed. You suffered in my place. You bore the wrath reserved for me. Now all I know is grace." And in that, and the scene that they paint for that part of the song is this man, this guy standing before the cross, and Jesus is on the cross. I mean, it's obviously Jesus on the cross. Jesus isn't detailed or drawn very well. I mean, it's just there's nothing spectacular about it, but it shows this massive blast of fire, this massive blast of fire hitting Jesus on the cross and shielding the man from that blast of fire. And that blast of fire is the wrath of God, and it's showing how Jesus has taken the wrath that we would have taken in our place. Like he took it on himself and spared us from that wrath, and it's a powerful scene. And so there's a lot of debate on this, even in the Reformed camp, particularly when the young, restless, and Reformed types start digging into Reformed theology, and they find that there's more to this than Calvinism.
Yeah,
there's definitely more to this Calvinism, but we're not gonna dive onto that per se, just because that's a whole episode in of itself.
Yeah.
But so the tabernacle and the temple. So Schaeffer establishes that there's not any prohibitions on making art, and then he moves into the scriptures to describe the beauty of the tabernacle in the time of Moses, and then the temple in the time of Solomon. Of the tabernacle, Schaeffer notes a couple of things. Right, you can take Exodus 25, 31 through 33. I'll take the other two.
28, 31 through 34.
No, the middle one.
Middle one. Oh, I see. Okay.
So Exodus 25, 18. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Of hammered work you shall make them on the 2 ends of the mercy seat.
And then starting in verse 31, you shall make a lampstand of pure gold. The lampstand shall be made of hammered work. Its base, its stem, its cups, its calyxes, and its flowers shall be of one piece with it. There shall be 6 branches going out of its sides, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side of it. 3 cups made like almond blossoms, each with calyx and flower on the other branch, for the 6 branches going out of the lampstand.
And then you shall make the robe, and he's talking about the robe of the priest. You shall make the robe of ephod all of blue. It shall have an opening for the head in the middle of it, with a woven binding around the opening, like the opening in a garment, so that it may not tear. On its hem you shall make pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet yarns around its hem, with bells of gold between them, a golden bell and a pomegranate around the hem of the robe.
Now, a lot of the things he said, like, almond blossoms, pomegranates, yada, 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 are, images of things on the earth. And I don't think God would command us to break a commandment.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that God dictated these instructions to Moses, that God wanted his tabernacle to be constructed in this way. And then Schaeffer notes, and I didn't put the quote in here, but Schaeffer notes when it comes to like the hems of the robes of the priests, on its hem you shall make pomegranates of blue and purple and scarlet yarns. Well, when pomegranates, purple and scarlet, that's reasonable colors for a pomegranate. That spectrum is reasonable for the color of a pomegranate.
And also, I can't remember all the details, but I remember when I took an Old Testament class, Buddy went over every detail of the tabernacle and showed every single minor detail and the representation it had in Jewish society at the time pointed to Christ.
Right.
Like the purple, color of royalty.
Yes.
Scarlet, the color of blood.
And then, but Schaeffer notes that blue's not a color for pomegranates.
Not at all.
No, blue's not a color for pomegranates. And Schaeffer notes that God commanded that blue pomegranates, which don't exist,
It'd be awesome if they did.
It'd be cool if they did have blue pomegranates. But anyway, he commanded that they be part of the temple, part of the robe of the priest. It doesn't have to be like perfectly photographic in the photographic sense. And then of the temple, so later on, in the Old Testament, when Solomon is constructing the temple, Schaeffer notes a couple of things. You want to take the first and last, and I'll take the middle this time.
Okay, I lost my place.
He has an iPad, so he uses the iPad.
Here are 2 freestanding.
No, the temple, the scriptures for the temple.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, you take the first and the last. I'll take the middle.
Okay. 2 Chronicles 3:6. He adorned the house with settings of precious stones, so he lined the house with gold, its beams, its thresholds, its walls, and its doors, and he carved cherubim on the walls.
Later on in that chapter, in verses 16 and 17, he made chains like a necklace and put them on the tops of the pillars, and he made 100 pomegranates and put them on the chains. He set the pillars in front of the temple, one on the south and one on the north. That on the south he called Jachin, and that on the north he called Boaz.
And then going to 2 Chronicles chapter 4, 2-4, says, he then made the sea of cast metal. It was round 10 cubits from brim to brim, and 5 cubits high, and a line of 30 cubits measured its circumference. Under it were figures of gourds for 10 cubits encompassing the sea all around it. The gourds were in 2 rows cast with it when it was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea was set on them, and all the rear parts were inward.
So, this is the temple in Solomon's time. This is some crazy, beautiful stuff. I mean, yes, like you pointed out, it does. I mean, it does point to spiritual realities, but there's no reason why God commanded these things to be made, and to have the excellence in them just testify to themselves. So there's a double testimony here. There's a testimony to the craftsmanship of the things that are being made, and there's the testimony to the spiritual realities that it conveys, that it conveys to God. Schaeffer notes in particular of 2 Chronicles 3:16 and 17 that there are 2 freestanding columns. They supported no architectural weight and had no utilitarian engineering surfaces. Utilitarianism, I love that word. They were there only because God said they should be there as a thing of beauty. Upon the capitals of these columns were pomegranates fastened upon chains. artwork upon artwork. If we understand what we're reading here, it simply takes our breath away. This is something overwhelmingly beautiful.
Yeah, I really wish I could have seen this.
Yeah, like this would have been amazing to see. This would have been, oh my gosh, this would have been incredible to see.
Like, I mean, Asakusa Temple, for how dark it was very beautiful.
Which makes it even sadder.
Yeah, but compared to this,
I mean,
if this was still around, Asakusa Temple would be nothing compared to that.
I mean, there's gold everywhere in this place. I mean, there's so much gold everywhere. And here's the thing is that, this is all down to earth stuff. Like, people had to make these things. I mean, there is spiritual realities pointing to this, like you said, but people actually had to put this stuff together.
Which, that would have been a lot of dang work.
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get the temple to get the temple built. But yeah, I mean, like, real material had to be used, real construction had to be done, real people had to make these things in real places.
And then you have to also think about when Herod took the throne and tried to make the Jews like him more, he made this even more impressive.
Yeah, he built the temple even more amazing, but he built it without the instruction of God.
Yeah.
Because Solomon, like Moses, was told by God directly how to build the temple. And so Herod did not have that instruction. And so, I mean, fine for Herod for building it, I guess, but it wasn't it wasn't necessarily a God thing. But this just means that God isn't like just interested in the spiritual merit of our art, but he's also like interested in the whole process too. The instruments that we play, the colors we paint with, cameras we film on, pens we write with. God isn't interested in our artistic endeavors only if there's a spiritual reality that is pointing to it. Like, God didn't have to have the temple and the tabernacle be constructed this way to get the spiritual realities that he wanted conveyed come across. He didn't have to do that, but that's what he
could have just said, gather driftwood and make this kind of look like an ox.
Or he just could have put it on paper and just said, said whatever he wanted. He didn't have to. He didn't have to design these things the way that he wanted these things done, just so that it had the spiritual component. He did this because he's the creator God. I mean, he created the whole universe and everything in it. Which, in the universe and everything in it, we find some truly beautiful and amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, God is truly the most amazing artist that could ever possibly exist. He is far and away the most incredible artist that ever was and ever will be. And so we don't have to always point to a spiritual justification for our art, because God has shown in Scripture that he is interested in the whole process. And the whole process is something that's of value to him. It's not like, oh, well, you're building it right now, I'm not interested. I'm only get interested, when it's done. And, it tells people about Jesus and blinking lights and, neon holographic, lights or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, he's interested in the whole process. So the Bible is definitely been one of the biggest inspirations for art, for all types of art throughout the centuries. But thankfully, God has left us examples and testimonies inside the Bible, of events in the Bible where he commanded beautiful things to be created for his glory. And Schaeffer just not pulling this idea out of thin air. This isn't, a relatively modern thing, the idea of making art for the glory of God. It's from the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's from the Bible. We see it in the Scripture. And so this means amazing things for the Christian who is free to create to the glory of God. And the Scripture has left us testimonies of where God has given us the freedom to do that. And so the next time someone tells you that art and the Bible don't mix, just take them to the Old Testament and
just read the entire passage about how they built the tabernacle, and that alone should be enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's sure. Now, people might say, well, okay, God's only interested in certain types of beauty. That, God isn't interested in certain types of music or certain types of paintings, or the list could go on and on. But it's like, well, how do you know that? How can you prove that?
Prove it.
Yeah, prove it. You really can't. And it seems like from Scripture and what we can do from other passages that God is interested in all beauty and all creativity wherever it can be found. is of God, that he is the source of beauty, he is the fountainhead of beauty, and that if the possibilities are limitless and that there are no real boundaries, meaning that you just don't have to listen to only Christian music. You can listen to progressive metal because progressive metal is amazing, and you can listen to rap, and you can listen to classical, and you can listen to all these other styles of music and look for beauty and create beauty because God himself is interested in beauty. It's sad that we have to point that out. It's kind of sad that we have to point that out, and that's such a radical thought because it really shouldn't be a radical thought, but it is. Alas. Sa.
Indeed.
Sad day. But yeah, next week we'll continue to look in the Old Testament for a couple of other things concerning art. But Brett, let's start shutting her down and wrapping it up. You got any recos for this week?
Yes, recently I played the first chapter of a new sort of Telltale style game called Life is Strange.
Oh, yeah.
Now, fair warning, there is, a fair amount of language in it, and, I mean, you see a few references and uses of drugs, but, I mean, overall, it is a very interesting game. Basically, you play a senior in a private high school for the arts, primarily photography.
Hey.
Yeah, hey. Perfect tie-in. But anyways, and at the beginning you see this girl murdered in the bathroom, and then you somehow reverse time to before you're even in there, and then through using this power you save her life. And throughout it, it's very decision-based RPG, no combat, and you can reverse time to change your decisions. Now, at first glance, this might make it seem like, oh, then that's easy. I don't have to reload. I can just rewind time in the game and change my story or change my decision if it's bad. But it just makes it harder, in my opinion, because you can look at, two different decisions and their immediate consequences, but you're not going to know the long-term effect until it's too late to reload. Like the first major game-changing decision, I made one decision that turned out to be bad, so I rewound, picked the other decision, and that was also terrible. It was like, both of these things are bad. I don't want to do either of these decisions.
So basically, it's like, real life.
Basically, yeah.
Except that we don't have the ability to travel back in time and choose something different.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And
really, really interesting.
The second chapter comes out sometime next month, and I'll definitely be looking forward to that. And it's only $5 for the first chapter, so I mean, you can do that, see if you like it, and then if you don't, you're just out $5.
Oh yeah, you're out. A Starbucks in the morning, or some other expensive coffee shop in the morning.
And it's also on Steam, which means the potential for it going on sale for like 5 cents is very high.
Oh yeah, Steam puts all sorts of things on sale for dirt cheap. My reco for this week is, I don't know what I should reco this week. Oh snap. Pro Tools. Not Pro Tools.
You did that last week.
Disc Tools Pro. I didn't know. Yeah, Disc Tools Pro. So my Mac is starting to have a little bit of problems. It's a 2-year-old plus Mac, and computers need maintenance. And I mean, I take really good care of my Mac. I run maintenance on it, quite a bit, but I was having some problems in the middle of the week, and Disc Tools Pro, I mean, it covers everything. Like if you're a Mac user and if you don't have Disc Tools Pro, you're missing out. That software does some really, really, really amazing stuff. It's expensive. I mean, it runs about $80, but it's probably the best $80 that you'll spend for your Mac. You'll get so much out of it, and it will pay for itself by extending the life of your Mac relatively quickly. So Disc Tools Pro, that is my reco for the week. And so we recorded this particular show early in the morning instead of usual Sunday afternoon, just because Grammy party and stuff. I got pizza to bake and other stuff to do. So Brett, thanks for waking up earlier in the morning and taking your early Sunday morning to record the show. I really appreciate it.
No problem, and I'm honestly surprised I was able to stay this coherent.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you're definitely coherent, which, I mean, you're usually coherent anyway, but for the morning, because you're not a morning person by any
Not
means.
at all.
I am a morning person. I'm not. We're the opposite in that you can stay up till like 2 in the morning and be fine. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to stay up till 2 in the morning. Like, I'm gonna die. Yeah, I'm definitely a morning guy. But yeah, thanks for taking time out of your Sunday morning to do this. And we always want to take time each episode to mention the gospel, because the gospel is the reason why we're interested in this subject, and the gospel is the reason why we care about this subject. We talked a little bit earlier about Marilyn Manson and how we would like to see Marilyn Manson come to Christ, which in many ways is a really hilarious statement, just because from a fundamentalist background, you can point to like the worst possible person ever and be like, yeah, that person needs Jesus. But Marilyn Manson is a sinner just like we are. Marilyn Manson is no less deserving of Christ as we are. We were all dead in our sins and trespasses. We were all enemies of God and under his wrath, but we didn't have anything in us meriting or deserving salvation of any type. And so Marilyn Manson and Brett and I, the only difference is that we're saved by the grace of God and confess that saving faith, and Marilyn Manson does. Other than that, our sins look different, but we have the same problem, and we need the same Savior. And so the gospel is the reason why we care so much about the arts and the music and creativity, because there's so much lostness in the world, and so much unbelief is perpetrated through music. And the gospel is the answer to all the heartbreak songs and all of the problems of other songs where there is sin and brokenness reigning and ruling the day, where now we're able to sing about greater realities that come through Jesus Christ. So yeah, the gospel. We like the gospel a lot.
Indeed.
And now it's time to close this thing out, and then get ready to head for church, because we got to go to church because church. I love church. I mean, it's not like we need a justification for church or anything, because church. And not the chicken. Church's chicken is not all that great. Church's chicken is actually kind of nasty.
Yeah. KFC.
Yeah, KFC. If you want to follow us on Twitter, our handle is AALblog. If you want to find us on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Another Ascending Lark. You can hit us up on anotheraascendinglark.com, and you can shoot us an email at anotheraascendinglark@gmail.com, or you can tell us about all of your misremembered events, and depending on how hilarious it is, we just might read it on air. Or if you hit us up on Twitter or Facebook. And by the time you're listening to this episode, the Grammys will have been done. We will talk about the Grammys next week. We'll break down the events of the Grammys next week. And so if you want to hear our thoughts while the Grammys are going on, just go find us on Twitter, and you can scroll back down and read the thoughts that we tweeted throughout the night. And if you want to talk to us, you're always free to tweet us, because we don't bite, except if it's food. Because, in order to chew, you have to bite your food.
Only on occasion.
Only on occasion, unless it's like soup, and then you just have to swallow it.
Or if you're just really hungry and you don't feel like wasting the energy chewing.
You don't have enough calories to chew. You have to eat the calories to get the calories to chew. This endless cycle of calorie consumption. Yeah, this endless cycle of calorie consumption. But you guys have a great week, and we will see you next week. And yeah, thanks for listening. We definitely appreciate you guys listening. And yeah, you guys just have a good week. It's time for us to go to church.